and gentlemen, the Montreal Canadiens continue to be one of the most interesting teams in the league. We have so much to talk about just over the last couple of days regarding an Askarov Fowler rejected trade, a big trade that could be coming for the Habs as they are now still big fish hunting, as well as big news with Demidov, Slafkovsky, and more. And we're going to be breaking down all the news, all the trade rumors right here presented by BetUS, so make sure you watch till the end and make sure you hit that subscribe button for more hockey content and Habs content just like this all throughout the year. Now, the first topic we're going to cover today is Ivan Demidov, and finally, some good news with him in the KHL. As you can see from Habs on Reddit, 18-year-old Ivan Demidov became the youngest SKA player to score 4 points in a game yesterday. That's pretty sick. And this was really a dominant game for him against HK Sochi. Not the greatest competition in the world, but still KHL level competition, and he did quite well in it. You have this play here where he was battling along the boards, got right back to the point, and then Alexander Nikishin just has an absolute bomb. But just great work here by Demidov. You can see bouncing off the pressure, but still able to win that puck battle, which is incredibly important. Now we had this play, which would be Demidov's second goal of the season. You'd see he'd walk right in and just blast it. A fantastic wrister to get his second of the year. But I love how he jumps into the play, just so effortless, and I love to see that shot getting better and better, and him being more comfortable as well to use it. Then you, of course, have the solid assist and the empty net goal, and that will bring him to 4 points on the night. And now you can see with the scoring that he's put up, he in now 6 games has 3 goals, 3 assists for 6 points. A point per game player in the KHL, Demidov is officially there. And then you look at SK's total scoring for the season, and you can see right there, Demidov is first place at 18 years old, already leading his team in scoring. Now you do have Arseny Gritsuk as well with a point per game, but Demidov has that 1 more games played, so that factors in as well. But already at such a young age, being so good with SK, and especially considering the limited role too, I think around maybe 13 minutes of average time on ice and not a lot of power play opportunity, that's pretty impressive. Now obviously this game does elevate it quite a bit. Before this, there was some concerns over still the playing time and how that would factor into a season, but I think this game proved, even if it was during lower competition, that Demidov can still do well with that limited time, and we actually saw SK giving him more ice time throughout that game, and I think he ultimately ended up with around 16 minutes of time on ice per in the game, which was a big improvement for him. So hopefully the responsibility starts to finally start coming here for Demidov, because I mean he's one of the best players in SK already. You might as well play him. But we finally have some good Demidov news, and if this continues, if he's a point per game player by the end of the season, that would be blowing past my expectations. I mean, I was trying to be realistic with the ice time concerns with SK, but if he continues to do what he's doing here, if he gets a point per game while not even getting top power play minutes, top opportunities on that SK lineup, then I mean, that's about as good as you could have ever hoped for. Demidov continues to show why he was a top prospect in 2024, and right now he's continuing to do so. Now we're going to move on to another Montreal Canadiens top pick in Juraj Slafkovsky, and right now training camps for the Habs have begun. They just started a couple days back, and it seems like to start things out, the most improved and most impressive player has been Juraj Slafkovsky. As Eric Engels says, no question as to who was the best player on the ice during the first scrimmage, it was Slav. And this is big, especially considering we heard that compared to his other 2 training camps with Montreal, this was a massive improvement. And I mean, with Slafkovsky's game, there's obviously a lot that still can improve. Even though he had a really solid second half last year, getting 50 points ultimately in 82 games, there's still a lot of room for Slafkovsky to grow. And it's seeming like we're starting to see that as well at this training camp. Still, especially in terms of muscle, in terms of physicality, a lot more that I think he can insert himself with. And that seemed to be the biggest advantage with Slafkovsky compared to the other training camps. He was really asserting himself, really dominating every possession and every physical opportunity, and that's what you want to see out of Slafkovsky. That to me was one of the biggest strengths with Slafkovsky's future, and we're already starting to see that at 20 years old. I think we all believe that Slafkovsky is going to improve on that just because he'll hopefully have the consistency throughout the whole season, and I could see him being around 60 points or so. I think that's pretty realistic considering the advantages and the improvements that Montreal might be making, especially with the, of course, health of Kirby Dach, the trade of Patrik Laine. There's going to be some improvements in the top end of the scoring, and Slafkovsky will automatically benefit from that. And who knows, maybe even gets around 70 points or so. I don't know if he's going to be point per game already. I think that's pretty lofty expectations, but I think a 15, 20 point upgrade is something you could see this year. And then we heard some good news regarding Patrik Laine as well. Juraj Slafkovsky said he's very impressed with Patrik Laine's poise with the puck. Noted Laine didn't do much skating before arriving in Montreal a couple weeks ago, but already has made a mark on his new teammates. During the practices, you can see why he makes $8.7 million, he said. And that's pretty good to see see out of Laine already. We did see some clips, and Laine didn't look like he was just getting back under the swing of things, but that's what training camp is for, to get back into that conditioning level. That is maybe the biggest concern heading this year, is that Laine isn't up to NHL standard, but there's good reasons for that, being in the NHLPA Assistance Program, obviously dealing with a lot in his personal life. That's understandable. It seems, though, that Laine's skill set and already was been able to show is impressing his teammates, and that's good to see. Now, we got a lot more to talk about, especially when it comes to the trade front here for Montreal, but first I want to talk about today's sponsor in BetUS. If you guys don't know, they're doing a huge promo right now with the code YouTube150. You'll get an 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit and 125% sign-up bonus on your next two deposits there at BetUS. And with the NHL season right around the corner, there's so many opportunities to win big. You got opportunities as well with some of the European leagues. You can go through the DEL right now. You can go through Switzerland if you wanted to. But on the NHL side, you can, of course, go through the division winners, the Stanley Cup winners. If you're feeling Montreal right now, they have plus 8,000 if you're feeling really lucky there. Then you, of course, got the NHL awards and all of the predictions there. You got the Calder Trophy, which is going to be the big one for you guys, for the Habs fans here, because you got Laine Hutson at plus 700, one of the best odds to win the Calder. But if you do end up putting, let's say, $5 down for him to win, you'd win $35 by the end of the season. So a lot of potential there if you're really riding Laine Hutson this year. And of course, a big thank you to BetUS for sponsoring today's video. Now let's finally talk about the huge rejected trade between the Montreal Canadiens and the Nashville Predators. We heard a lot when Askarov was made available to trade that Montreal was in on him. They were one of the favorites to end up landing him. And of course, he ended up going to the San Jose Sharks. But this was a big goaltending prospect, and for some, the best goaltending prospect in the NHL. And you can see as a former 11th overall pick, he's had some solid pro seasons already, having a .911 save percentage this last year in 44 games. But what's interesting is now we know what Nashville specifically wanted out of the Montreal Canadiens. The player that, if a trade were to happen, they wanted to see come back, and it actually ended up being Jacob Fowler. As Coaster reports, according to Pierre LeBrun, Nashville asked for Jacob Fowler in a potential trade with Montreal for Askarov, but the Canadiens would not include the American goaltender. Now, this is going to be an interesting one to look back on, because you guys know I love Jacob Fowler. He was my best goaltender in the 2023 NHL draft. I said time and time again how much I love him. And interestingly, in my goalie rankings, I had Askarov 3 with Jacob Fowler 4. So there wasn't a big difference between these two guys for me. And I could absolutely see in Montreal's case why they prefer Fowler. I've heard a lot of people saying that they'd rather have a pro goaltender than Fowler, who of course is in the NCAA and hasn't proven himself yet. And that is true, I would say. But for Montreal, it kind of depends on what their timeline wanted to be. If they really wanted to compete sooner, then I could see a situation where they maybe prefer Askarov, of course, him being 3 years older. But in Fowler's case, I think he could be up to par with Askarov. Maybe not in terms of total talent, because I think in Askarov's case, the potential there is massive, but there are some pitfalls in his details. Where in Fowler's case, he's a confident goaltender, he's poised, he's somebody that can compete in every position in the game, and I think more so the mindset and the way he reads the game is the big strength, while Askarov, it's more so the skill set there. But I mean, Fowler's no slouch whatsoever. You see last year in the NCAA in his first season, he had a .926 save percentage, a .214 goals against average. He was somebody that was purely dominant for Boston College, and this next year, I think, is the leading contender for the Goaltender of the Year award. Right there with Trey Augustine. I think both of those guys are going to be battling for it out, but Fowler is right in the conversation. And here's the thing too, I've seen a lot of people assuming that this was going to be like a one-for-one trade, that Nashville just wanted Fowler for Askarov, and we don't know that. All we know is that Nashville wanted Fowler in a potential Askarov trade. That's it. So there could have been more a part of that deal. Nashville maybe wanted a first-round pick on top of it, or another top prospect, or somebody on the NHL roster that Montreal could have traded for something else. We don't know the exact details there, so I think it's unfair to lambaste Montreal for rejecting a trade like that if you prefer Askarov, because there might have been, and I think very likely, was more a part of that deal. Obviously, we can have the conversation about if it was a one-for-one. I think I still would have taken it if I was Montreal, considering Askarov's skill set, and I think as well, if Montreal loading up recently, how much they want to get better. I think Askarov could have helped that, but I don't blame them for not taking it. And I think in Fowler's case, he's going to be right behind Askarov in terms of play at the NHL level and in terms of compete and playoff ability. Fowler, you could make the case with his mindset and overall mentality, might have more playoff success in the future. Who knows? I would say, though, for Montreal, they were one of the few teams that was kind of weirded out that they were even in the Askarov race, mostly because they already had Jacob Fowler, especially if they traded a bunch of other assets for Askarov. Sure, it would have been the best tandem in the league, but I think they were kind of underselling Fowler and the potential that he had, because I think he can be a great starter for them. Maybe not this franchise Carey Price level player, but somebody that can be a great player for the future for the Habs. And going after Askarov was always just kind of weird to me, especially since they had Fowler in the system already. San Jose, to me, made way more sense as a team that could go after Askarov, that needed somebody like them in their prospect pool for that future. And ultimately, I'm kind of glad that Askarov went to the Sharks instead. I just don't think Montreal really needed him, and maybe that'll be something that ages horribly in the future. Who knows? But I think for the Sharks, it's great that they got him, and I think for the Habs, it might be good in the end that they kept Fowler. We'll just have to wait and see, but it is going to be a fascinating trade or rejected trade to look back on in a few years' time. But I'm fascinated by what you guys think. If you were GM of the Habs, if you took over Kenton Hughes' position, would you have taken that 1-for-1 deal if it were actually reality? I'd love to know down below. But we are not done yet with the Montreal Canadiens news. We got some big updates here from Marco Diamacchio talking about the Habs' potential trades in the future. Of course, already trading for Patrik Laine, already being in the Yaroslav Askarov talks. It seems like Montreal is not done just with trading, but with going after big players. As the article headline says, the Canadiens are still active in trade talks, seeking roster upgrades with key prospect and assets in hand. And as Marco says in the quote tweet, the Habs are still looking to improve their roster, but sources have said they're looking for another big splash rather than a lateral move. Interestingly, we got a reply here saying Dvorak, Andersson, Evans. I would say all three are available, but then Marco says moving those players would be for roster space. The Canadiens, according to my source, are looking for something bigger, but that doesn't mean that it's the only type of deal on the table. Now, we also get this comment about right-handed D and how the Habs might want to give Reinbacher, Barron, and Mailloux more playing time this year to get them a taste in NHL action. And as Marco says, the article says exactly this, and the personal target would be Rasmus Andersson. Now, this would be a fascinating addition for a lot of reasons. To see Montreal going after another big player, honestly, I thought they might have been done after the Laine deal, and I would have been completely content with the Habs' future because I think their defense is pretty well set. I mean, I feel like if Montreal were to go after anybody, they might as well go for like a #1 true D, because I think that's maybe the biggest concern. I think Reinbacher will play a lot of minutes. I think Laine Hutson's going to put up a lot of points, but both of those two have, I think, their flaws in the future and don't think are true #1 defensemen. You can make the case that Montreal could use that, could need that. And Andersson, I don't really see that type of player. I see him more in the Reinbacher range, obviously a lot more offensive, but I don't really know what problems Andersson fixes for the Habs. Now, sure, he's a couple years older, but really, what's the difference between a Mike Matheson and a Rasmus Andersson for the Habs? I mean, in Matheson's case, he's somebody that could put up massive power play totals, 62 points last year in 82 games, while in Andersson's case, even though Calgary has not been up to that level, he's never been able to put up 60-plus points in his career. His career high has been 50 points. So, if anything, if you trade a Matheson for Andersson, which I don't think would make sense for Calgary, you might be downgrading there. And in some cases, offensively, you might not be getting the player you want back. So, Andersson, I think, is a really interesting one, but I don't know if he makes too much sense for Montreal. I mean, I just look at this lineup and you consider the futures that'll be there in players like Ivan Demidov, Michael Hage, Owen Beck. I don't really know if they need another forward addition. That might be one of the things there, but to me, it would be maybe more of a stopgap middle six type player, which I don't think is the type of blockbuster trade that Marco would be talking about. And then you look at the defense, and I just don't know if they really need to make a move there either, especially if they improve on Matheson. I think it's going to be pretty hard to find that type of D right now, and I just don't really see the advantages for that, considering how many defensemen Montreal is coming up, how many options they're going to have there. Whoever you trade is going to take playing time from someone, and it just depends how better Montreal wants to be for the short-term future. That's really the big thing. Andersson would help for sure. He'd be a big upgrade over a Savard, perhaps, or would be able to have Caden Gooley on the left side again. There would be advantages to it, but I just feel like you also have disadvantages in other places. And as we talked about with Jacob Fowler, I think their goaltending is going to be just fine. I mean, soon you're going to have Jacob Fowler and Sam Montembeault, and that to me, it could be a pretty good tandem. So to me, there's very few holes for this Habs team that are on the larger scale, unless you trade for a #1 D, or that's pretty much the big advantage. That's the big trade that could help Montreal, but that's pretty much it. And trading for a number 1D is pretty hard to do. So we'll see. I mean, I respect the grind from Kent Hughes, still trying to improve this team. That's what you want to see out of a GM. But the reality of the situation, I just think will make Montreal kind of more stand pat. We'll likely see more cap dump deals as players like Dvorak end up going eventually. That to me, I think, is what Montreal will do. The core foundation of this team is already pretty great in the future, and I don't think you need to change it too much now. I wanted to see them go after a top 6 forward. That to me was the big weakness, and they went after Laine, they drafted Demidov, they drafted Hage, so I think they'll be just fine. But let me know down below, is there any players that you think could be a major addition for the Montreal Canadiens? And let us know what your thoughts on all the different news surrounding Demidov, Slafkovsky, the rejected trade there, and all your thoughts on everything there. A lot to talk about with Montreal recently that I want to talk to you guys about, so hopefully you guys ended up enjoying. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Share it with all the hockey fans you guys know online, and click on this card for all of my trade rumor content in one playlist. Of course, make sure you guys support BetUS using promo code YouTube150, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a great hockey day, and goodbye.